Two people get ready for the same evening. One sprays something from a bottle that costs $22, bought at a pharmacy between a bottle of shampoo and a pack of razors, smells like the idea of a forest that has never seen a tree, and fades completely before the appetizers arrive. The other applies 3 drops from a bottle that cost more than a car, was blended for her specifically by a nose in Grasse, who spent 4 months understanding who she was before he understood what she should smell like, and will still be present on the scarf she wore that evening 20 years from now. Same ritual, same gesture, the same moment of getting ready for something that matters, completely different experiences. Because perfume, at the level most people encounter it, is a product. And perfume, at the level most people will never encounter, is a portrait. One is manufactured, the other is made, and the distance between those two words is the entire story of what fragrance becomes when the constraints of mass production, retail markup, and celebrity endorsement are removed. And what remains is just the question of what a person actually smells like when someone who knows what they are doing is given the time and the resources to find out. So today I am breaking down the 7 levels of perfume. From the body spray that lasts 40 minutes to the bespoke commission that lasts a lifetime. Let's get into it. Level 1, the body spray and mass market fragrance. This is where most people's relationship with fragrance begins and where the personal care industry has built its most profitable and most efficiently manufactured olfactory product. Body sprays and mass market fragrances from brands like Axe, Lynx, and the celebrity fragrance lines that populate pharmacy shelves run $8 to $30 per bottle. The formula is simple: a high concentration of alcohol, a modest percentage of fragrance oil composed of synthetic ingredients chosen for longevity on a shelf rather than complexity on skin, and a marketing campaign built around the idea that the fragrance will produce a social outcome rather than a sensory one. The man who uses a body spray is not making a statement about fragrance. He is performing a hygiene ritual that happens to produce a scent as a byproduct. The scent fades in 40 minutes because the fragrance oil concentration is between 1 and 3% of the total formula, and the synthetic molecules chosen for that concentration were selected for cost rather than performance. He reapplies. He does not think about fragrance. He thinks about the other things he is doing while the fragrance happens to him in the background. This is exactly what the product was designed for, and it serves that function with complete commercial competence. Level 2, the designer fragrance, the department store standard. This is where fragrance first becomes a considered purchase and where the industry's most recognizable names and most heavily marketed products live. Chanel No. 5, Dior Sauvage, Tom Ford Black Orchid, Yves Saint Laurent Libre. Price runs $80 to $250 for a standard bottle, lead depending on the house and the concentration. The designer fragrance is a real fragrance in the sense that it was composed by a professional perfumer, and it contains a higher concentration of fragrance oil than the mass market product below it and will perform on skin for several hours before it fades. It is also a marketing exercise in the sense that the bottle, the campaign, the celebrity face, and the name of the house contribute as much to the purchase decision as the fragrance itself. The man who wears Dior Sauvage is the most widely sold men's fragrance in the world. He is wearing it because it is good and because 40 million other men are wearing it, and the consensus validation of 40 million purchase decisions is itself a form of reassurance that the product provides in addition to the scent. He does not think of himself as wearing a mass market fragrance. He thinks of himself as wearing a designer fragrance. The distinction matters to him. It is also a distinction that dissolves completely at the levels above this one. Level 3, niche and artisan perfumery. This is where fragrance separates from fashion and becomes a discipline in its own right, and where the people who take fragrance seriously begin to be taken seriously in return. Niche perfume houses like Byredo, Le Labo, Maison Margiela Replica, Diptyque, and Frederic Malle run $200 to $600 per bottle. The concentration is higher. The ingredients are more interesting. The fragrance was composed by a named perfumer whose identity is disclosed rather than obscured, because the house considers the nose behind the formula to be part of the product's value rather than a manufacturing detail to be kept internal. The man who discovers niche perfumery for the first time experiences the same recalibration that the first-class traveler experiences on his first lie-flat flight. He did not know the category could do this. He thought he understood what fragrance was. He has been wearing fragrance for 15 years, and in one afternoon in a small shop with a knowledgeable assistant and a series of blotters, he discovers that what he thought was the ceiling was actually the floor. He buys 2 bottles. He goes back the following month for a third. He has developed an opinion about fragrance families and a preference for specific perfumers and a mild but genuine irritation when someone at a dinner party is wearing something synthetic in his vicinity. He has become a fragrance person. He did not plan for this. The niche perfume house planned for it on his behalf. Level 4, rare ingredients and high concentration fragrances. This is where the formula changes and where the raw materials inside the bottle begin to cost more than the bottles of finished fragrance at the levels below. Based fragrances from houses like Amouage, Roja Parfums, Clive Christian, and Zajoff run $400 to $2,000 per bottle. The ingredients at this level are not synthetic approximations of natural materials. They are natural materials. Oud is harvested from agarwood trees that produce the resinous heartwood in response to a specific fungal infection, and that take decades to develop the quality that a serious perfumer requires. Rose Absolute from Grasse, where a single kilogram of Rose Absolute requires approximately 4 tons of rose petals harvested by hand in the early morning hours before the heat of the day destroys the volatile compounds that carry the fragrance. Iris butter from Florentine iris roots that must be aged for 3 years after harvest before they develop the violet and woody complexity that makes them irreplaceable in the compositions that depend on them. The man who wears an oud fragrance at this level is not wearing a perfume that smells like oud. He is wearing oud that has been composed into a fragrance by someone who understands how to work with a material that is simultaneously the most complex and the most uncompromising raw material in perfumery. The fragrance lasts 24 hours on skin and longer on fabric. He applies it once. He does not reapply. Reapplication is not how this material works, and the man who understands the material understands this. Level 5, the luxury perfume house E and the collector bottle. This is where perfume becomes an object as well as a scent, and where the bottle, the presentation, and the provenance of the formula contribute equally to the value of the product. Clive Christian No. 1 Imperial Majesty, Roja Parfums Haute Luxe, Joy by Jean Patou, or when it was still formulated with natural materials at the concentration it was designed for in 1930. Price runs $1,000 to $15,000 per bottle, depending on the house, the concentration, the bottle design, and whether the formula contains ingredients that are no longer commercially available in the quantities required for mass production. The collector bottle at this level is not a display object. It contains a fragrance that was formulated to a standard that the houses producing it refuse to compromise, regardless of the cost implications. The man who owns a bottle of Joy in its original formulation owns something that cannot be reproduced because the fields in Grasse that produced the Jasmine Absolute used in the 1930 formula no longer exist at the scale required, and the economics of reproducing them have never made commercial sense to anyone except the person who wants the fragrance to exist as it was and is willing to pay what that standard costs. He does not wear it every day. He wears it when the occasion is worth it. He knows when the occasion is worth it. This is a form of judgment that the levels below do not require. Level 6, the private perfumer and the bespoke commission. This is where the fragrance leaves the product entirely and becomes a conversation between a client and a nose, and where the result of that conversation is a formula that has never existed before and will never be offered to anyone else. A bespoke fragrance commission from a master perfumer runs $10,000 to $100,000, depending on the perfumer, the process, the number of iterations required, and the quantity of fragrance produced at the end of the commission. The process begins not with a brief, but with a biography. The perfumer meets the client, sometimes once, sometimes multiple times over several months. He asks questions that are not about fragrance preferences. He asks about memory, about places, about the specific sensory details of experiences that the client considers formative. He builds a picture of who this person is at an olfactory level that the client has never been asked to articulate before, and that the articulation of produces a self-knowledge that is itself part of the value of the process. The formula that results from this process contains ingredients that were chosen for their relationship to the client's specific profile. Generically beautiful ingredients. Ingredients that are specifically true to this person. When the fragrance is worn, it is not recognizable as belonging to any category the wearer has encountered before, because it does not belong to any category. It belongs to them. Level 7, the final level, the $1 million bottle and the formula that will outlast its owner. There are fragrances in the world that exist as singular objects in the same way that the Rolls-Royce's Coach Build Commission and the Alma's Caviar Tin exist as singular objects. One of a kind, made once, existing in a form that cannot be reproduced and was not intended to be. Decanter Golden Delicious $1 million bottle. Clive Christian #1 in the Baccarat Crystal Decanter. Shalimar Parfum Initial in the Baccarat Crystal Flacon, produced in a numbered edition of 3. Price runs from $250,000 to over $1 million per bottle, and the price is not a function of the fragrance alone. It is a function of the object, the rarity, the materials, and the specific category of possession that an object at this level occupies. A bottle of perfume at this price is not a grooming product. It is an artifact. The fragrance inside it is extraordinary. The bottle around it is a piece of decorative art produced by craftspeople whose other clients are museums. The combination of extraordinary fragrance inside a museum-quality object produces something that has no precise category because it sits across the boundary between the functional and the collectible in a way that most objects never attempt. Here is the honest verdict. Level 1 is a hygiene ritual that produces scent as a byproduct. Levels 2 and 3 are where fragrance becomes intentional and where the category first reveals its depth to people willing to look for it. Level 4 is where the raw materials take over the conversation and the ingredients become the story. Level 5 is where the bottle and the formula achieve parity, and the object becomes as important as what is inside it. Level 6 is where the fragrance stops being a product and becomes a portrait of the person who commissioned it. Level 7 is where the portrait is housed in an artifact, and the artifact is worth more than most people's homes and is worn on the wrist of someone who decided that extraordinary things exist to be used rather than stored. The mistake most people make is thinking perfume is about smelling good. At every level above 4, it is not about smelling good. It is abominable, specifically. Specific to a place, to a memory, to a person, to a moment in natural history that produced a raw material that will not be produced again at this quality in this lifetime. If this channel exists for exactly that conversation, and it gets more interesting every week.